Which is bad. Hmm. A bit better. Okay. So I'm going to get started. Um, okay, so I'm in frame now. Yeah. All right. So today's live is going to be on the muscle and strength training pyramid. Um, this is a book that's quite well known and was based on a book quite well known. I put in the sort of description of this the link for the book and sort of who it's by the authors. So just as a disclaimer, not entirely all of this is my thought process. It's also based on evidence that's been written before. Okay, so basically, um, I'm basing this live on how you can take your training to the next level, and how you can better achieve your goals by taking a lot more of a structured approach into your training. Um, so what I mean by the pyramid, there is a hierarchy that you need to have to successfully structure your routine in the gym or whatever it is training. Okay, so we've got an order from most to least important. Today we're going to go over the first three of the pyramid, and the second three will go on over on a later date. So the pyramid is as follows. In order from most of the least important, you've got adherence in a training program, most important. Volume, intensity, and frequency, second most important. Progression, third most important. Exercise selection, fourth most important. Rest periods, fifth, and tempo, sixth. Okay, so what this is based on is called periodization, which is the structure of how you develop a plan that can be um, periodized based on micro, so within a week, let's say, or macro, let's say within a month or a year, in terms of what your achievements are, like what you're trying to achieve out of training. Okay, so first, we'll start with adherence, the most important part of a strength and training program. Okay. Um, so, what adherence should be based on is three things, and it's called REF. What sort of exercise and gym training you put yourself towards should be R of ref realistic. So you need a good schedule and a time frame. So this needs to be something that you can do around your work, around your general life, and something that you can adhere to over a specific schedule that you're able to stick to. So include your holidays, include what all the time off that you get. You have to be realistic in what you are able to do. If it's something that if you're just starting off at the gym, don't set yourself to go to the gym 7 days a week. It's not going to happen for anyone. Everyone's human, right? You get lazy, you get tired. Um, Set yourself a goal that you're able to stick to. Okay, so realistic. Second of all, it needs to be enjoyable. Um, so often you think, okay, so why is this so important? It's adherence at number one. Why is something that's enjoyable so important? Well, something that is not enjoyable is not going to be realistic, and you're not going to stick to it. So And it's really important for you to realize that something an optimal training program where you're doing I don't know, push pull legs in a strict regimen of this amount of sets. That's just a boring bicep curl or a tricep extension. Let's say if you're trying to grow your arms, it might be optimal, yes. So you're going to be achieving the best results within a certain amount of time, but it's also not going to be realistic and not something you're able to stick to because you'll be uh, out of ideas and out of enjoyment within the first week of training. So makes a program that you enjoy and something that you feel like you can stick to. And thirdly, it needs to be flexible. So it needs to fit an overall theme. Um, it needs to be able to, you need to select exercises or a program that is based upon something, has an overall, uh, overall theme behind it, rather than it being this exercise, because you can interchange that. Maybe one week you don't feel like doing something, maybe another week you do feel like you feel like doing squats, another week you feel like doing deadlifts. That's how you can change and make something more tailored to something you want to actually go and do. So make it flexible. So ref, that's what you need to follow. Realistic, enjoyable, flexible. Um, Next, so that's sort of the adherence. So that's how you are able to be able to go to the gym and not feel burnt out, right? Those 3 points. Next, we've got volume, intensity, and frequency. Though that is how you should base your training program on, like the fundamentals, basically. So they volume, intensity, and frequency are interdependent, which means if you increase one, you increase another, or vice versa, or has a inverse linear relationship. So if you increase your volume, which let's say volume is the amount of times that you go to the gym per week, you're then increasing your intensity because you are lifting more weight. So it becomes more intense, higher RPE, which means higher exertion. And you are also increasing your frequency because you're going more often. So that's how the three interlink. You change one, it changes the other. Um, each can be more important than another depending on the context. So if you are someone who is trying to gain strictly strength, i.e., you are going to get stronger and that is your goal, then you're probably going to rely on intensity. So, um, how much power, how much pressure you're putting through the exercises, the amount of weight you lift is usually how you would identify intensity. That's going to be higher than the volume, isn't it? Because you're going to lift less, but lift more. So you have that relationship, and also the frequency is going to go down. So it depends on what you're trying to achieve. If you're someone who's trying to get fitter, more, you're going to aim to have a higher volume than intensity. So think about what you're trying to achieve and base that on the volume, intensity, and frequency on this. So let's get a little bit more into each of these specific points. So intensity usually refers to load, the amount, the usually the weight that you're putting through your body. Load is a word that basically means the stress on the body. So um, what we need to understand is, so I've based this mainly on strength. So um, what we need to realize that with intensity, that strength isn't just a property; it's also a skill. So to get good at lifting heavy, you need to be specific in what you do, and you need to be able to develop the skill and neuromuscular control for that exercise. So let's say you're going to do a clean and jerk. That means that you are going to have to lift enough for you to get comfortable with that movement. So that's where the intensity comes in. The amount that you lift can mean that you are more comfortable with that specific weight. So don't think of strength as something that is linear push. You're going to push that or you're going to pull that. It's about what exercise you're doing and how you do it as well. Okay, so that's that point. Um, so when we go into, how do we actually measure our intensity? Um, so we're thinking about, okay, the load on the body. So how would you put that into numbers? There are three main ways that you want to do that. You want to do that as a percentage of a one repetition max. A one repetition max is the maximum amount of that you can lift at one rep, and you want to base your training on that, the percentage of that one lift. Okay, so if you are lifting, uh, and your goal is for hypertrophy, so building muscle, which is something I mentioned in the previous slide, then you want to do around 65 to 75% of a one repetition max in order for you to build muscle. Okay. But if you're trying to get just stronger, you want closer to 80, 90% of a one repetition max. Um, then if you don't, okay, let's say, oh yeah, but I've never lifted a one repetition max. I've never done a one rep to see how high I can get. I wouldn't even attempt that. And what you can do is a rep max. So not a one repetition max. So you base it on, oh, I can do 90 kilograms in a squat for 3 reps. That would be a repetition max. So you can base your session on that. So you know that if you can do 90 kilograms for three, then you're more likely to do 65 for 10. Right. So that's how you can base your session. Next is RPE, so a measure of perceived exertion, and also what you can do to quantify that. So exertion is, what is exertion? It's the repetitions that you can have in reserve and how much energy you're expending. If you are doing a bench and you're struggling on the last rep and you can't get you're going to failure, you would have zero RP, so 0 reps in reserve, and then you work down from there. Let's say, oh, I was able to do 10 reps and I could have gone for a few more, then you can maybe 4 more, then you can put that 4 as the RPE, and that's how you can base the intensity that you are lifting at. Okay, so percentage one rep max, rep max, so 3 to 10, let's say, and RPE, reps in reserve. So okay, if that's how we measure intensity, I spoke briefly about what you're trying to gain in terms of if you're trying to gain strength, if you're trying to build muscle. Um, you want to be basing strength as heavy and hypertrophy as heavy enough. That was a quote from the book. So what that means is you want to be doing to lift in a hypertrophy range. You want it to be, it's heavy. I feel it's the weight, but I could do more. That's the level you want to build muscle. If you want strength, it needs to be just heavy. Like I'm struggling to pick this up, but I can just about do it. So that's how you should think about it in a much easier way for you to, if you're someone who's not thinking about all the rep maxes, that's how you can also structure it. Um, Also, you may be thinking, okay, let's say I do 10 reps and I have 10 and I'm struggling. That's it. I fail at 10. And you might be thinking, okay, should I always go to that failure? At what point should I not get to that last rep struggle? You need to think about how it fits in with your training. If you think about volume, are you able to maintain that for 7 days a week? No, you're not. If you lift 10 reps and you're struggling to get that 10th, if you go to the gym the next day, you're going to be able to do 8 because you're fatigued. So think about how often you go to the gym, how often you want to go to the gym, and base your training on that. Do enough that you're able to get the change and adaptation you need, but don't do too much so that it compromises your volume. Okay. Also, if you're thinking about intensity, all right, so what should I be doing? Should I be doing compound exercises, so exercises that encompass a lot of parts of the body, or should I be doing isolation, just one muscle at a time? Again, if you're thinking more about strengthening that one muscle, more isolation is going to work for targeting the muscle specifically. But if you're looking for building muscle, compound exercises can work better. Okay, but again, you're thinking about how enjoyable the session is. So if it's not, if you just doing bicep curls and just doing a calf raise on one leg is boring for you, then encompass that and realize that maybe compound is going to be better for me, even if I'm trying to build some strength. So everything is interdependent. Okay. So that's sort of the main points that we're going to make for intensity. If we move on to volume, volume basically means the total work performed. So the amount of lifting that you do in a session would be volume. The amount of sessions that you do in a week would be volume. So the amount within the session that you do would be volume. The amount of sessions you do a week is frequency. We'll go on to more of that later. So I mentioned previously before that strength is skill acquisitioning, and it's about neurological adaptation. So you're getting your body ready for certain movements. If you're more comfortable with certain movements, then that mind muscle connection is going to be better. So that's sort of like a neurological point behind that. So if you work on a specific movement enough, that volume is important to think about. You need to do enough to make it so it sticks in your head as much as you do to think about whether you're strength training or building muscle. So it needs to have that correct balance of volume if you're trying to build that strength. That sort of skill acquisition and neurological adaptation isn't as important when you're thinking about building muscle, right? Because it's about with hypertrophy and building muscle, it's about doing it any which way, right? You're just going to lift and you're going to build muscle in that way. Of course, it's important to do to get the correct form, but it's less important than if with building muscle as it is for strengthening, because you have to be a lot more particular with the movements. Following sort of volume as well, you know, you might be thinking, so how much is too much? Too much volume can actually have a negative effect on what you're trying to achieve. Okay, so you have to put the fitness and fatigue graph in your head and realize that how much do I want to get fitter with the specific exercise I'm doing, but also do I want to prevent tiredness? You have to get that balance correct. It's you may be thinking, okay, so well, how do I solve that then? If I'm lifting a certain amount, I think I'm going to get tired. How am I supposed to put a number to that? What one way that you can do that is called tapering or a deload. That basically means on a certain session in a week, you realize that, okay, I'm going to be a bit tired here. Let me take that day and make that more of a rest day, but you're still going to the gym and you're still making sure that you are achieving some form of lift and some form of fitness so that you don't regress. Okay. So deloading and tapering off is a good thing for you to consider if volume is a bit too much. Okay. So finally, we've been over intensity and volume. We'll go over frequency now. Time. Okay, fine. So frequency is basically your volume plus your intensity. Okay, they're both together. You don't have to think about frequency as the amount of work you do in one session, or it doesn't even mean how much you do in 6 sessions. It can be frequency can depend on how much you are going to the gym in a week, and you've got to think about it in a broader scale as well as a smaller scale. What's your frequency within a week? What's your frequency within a whole month? If you're trying to achieve, uh, lifting in a competition to running a marathon, how much do you need to do in the entire year for you to achieve that, right? So you can think about that from a small to a larger scale. So it also, when you think about frequency, is if you spread it out more, you get more time to practice. Okay, That's the one thing that people often overlook is when we're trying to make that neuromuscular adaptation to get better at a specific exercise, especially if it's a more difficult one like a deadlift squat or a clean and jerk, for example, which is one of the most difficult lifts, then you need more time to practice in order for you to get good at it. And then if you get good at it, you can get stronger. So it works in a good fashion in that way if you think about spreading it out more. So that's one thing that people often don't consider is that spreading out, that you don't have to always do everything at once. The more you do it, the more practice you get. But again, you want to avoid fatigue. So it's all about balancing all of these together. So the second on that pyramid after adherence is volume, frequency, intensity, and that's probably the one that has the most to talk about. But it's about balancing all of those aspects that I spoke about into one. We're finally going to go over onto progression, which is the third one along of the pyramid. So we've gone from the fit base end, we've gone up one and one more to progression. So in order for us to think about, okay, how should I progress in a week? It's good to have an idea of a model session. Okay, so based on what was written in the book and what some recommendations are, and this again, I'm saying this is a recommendation. I'm not saying you do this, but this is something that works for some people. If you think about the volume, intensity, and frequency, let's put all of these together, and we're thinking about, okay, how can we get better? For volume in a week, you're thinking about 40 to 70 reps per muscle group per session. Okay, that is an ideal amount of volume in order for you to build some strength. 40 to 70 reps per muscle group per session. That's one example. If you're thinking about the intensity, okay, if you want to go for strength, then we're talking about, as we talked about previously, that if we're thinking about how we're going to measure it, you should be doing 1 to 6 rep max for 3/4 of your session, a 7+ rep max for a quarter. Let me explain that a little bit more. What I mean by that is you should be doing, for strength, you should be doing the majority of your session within that 1 to 6 repetition max range, and then you should be doing less of that for more than 7. Okay, so that's building towards a little bit of muscle growth as well as strength in there. Then, if you're thinking about more of a hypertrophy building muscle, that increases a bit. So the 6 to 12 repetition max range for 3/4 of that session, and below 6 and above 12, so let's say 3 to 15 for a quarter of that session. Okay, so it's all about what you're trying to achieve and basing it on there. Frequency 2 to 3 times a week per muscle group. That's usually how you want to do that for frequency. That can be split into different ways. So you can do 2 or 3 full body sessions a week. You can do legs push pull, right? You could do upper lower off, or you could do upper lower off, upper lower off, something like that, right? So you're spreading it out a little bit more. Again, it entirely depends on your current level. Someone who is starting off, I'd recommend usually 2 to 3 full body sessions so that they can get the entire body used to doing some exercises, right? If they've never been to the gym before, that's something that I would recommend for someone just starting off. So that's an idea of a model session. But right, so okay, we're talking about progression here. If we're doing some of what I mentioned before in terms of a weekly session, then how can I progress that? You have to think about the different types of stimulus. Okay, you can think about the weight. You can progress the weight. You can go up in small increments per week. You can think about progression session to session, week by week, or you can think about it in a monthly basis. In January, I would like to be lifting 100 kilograms in a squat, but in February, I want to be 110. So within that month, you're going to be doing 100, 105, 110, and then back rest, and then increase the reps. 100 at a higher rep, 105 at 100 reps at a higher rep, 115 at a high rep. So that's how you should be thinking about progression, increasing the weight. You can do that in a different way by increasing the volume. And then thirdly, you can advance the exercise that you're doing. So instead of doing a double leg press, do a single. Instead of doing a squat body weight, do a sumo squat with weight, right? You can change the exercise that you're doing to make it a little bit more advanced to what you're doing currently. Um, at a beginner level, you're going to be thinking about each individual workout and how you can increment that in per workout. But as you get more used to the gym, you're then going to spread that out to more of a weekly basis. As you get more advanced, and you're thinking about this month, I want to achieve X, Y, and Z. So with progression, it depends on how you want to spread it out, and there are usually recommendations based on the level that you are at. Okay, so to summarize, you have progression from uh, adherence. So you have a pyramid that starts at adherence. Adherence is the most important thing that you want to do to get back or to the gym. Then you're thinking about how you're structuring the sessions, volume, intensity, frequency. And thirdly, you're thinking about, which is probably the least important of the three, is a progression system. But you can't do that until you get adherence and think about how you structure the sessions first. Okay, so in the next slide, we're going to go over the next three, which is exercise progression, etc., tempo. And what we'll do that for that next session is similar to this one. We'll talk about what kind of exercises you can do, and that sort of less important things, but could be if you're someone who has achieved the first three and is thinking about progressing to the next level, then we can talk about more of those things. Okay, so that'll be it for this live. Quite a long one actually. So hopefully this made a little bit of sense to you. It's quite tricky to do without actually having a visible sign showing of the pyramid, but hopefully it's made some sense. Okay. Also, check the description again for the link to where you can buy the book, which is really can be really helpful for you if you want to read some more. Okay, bye.